First of all, I would like to thank you very much for inviting me to present how we work with preservation in the physical heritage collections in the Danish National Library. You will see in the coming half hour how we work with our tasks, how they evolved over time, and how we deal with all the future developments. We are a national library with a large collection of physical heritage in text, images, but also digital collections, for example, directly from the internet. And in the National Library, we think about collections that we keep them for the nowadays users, but also keep them ready for future users, even though we don't know when the future reader will ask for a certain document. The university library has grown a lot larger over the last 20 years. And today we serve 4 universities with library service. And since the merge of 2 large national libraries in 2017, we have come a lot closer to the public libraries with their loan service to supplement them. Also, we do research in cultural heritage, also preservation, and we increase knowledge and awareness through exhibitions and other events. The Danish Legal Deposit Act forms the basis for our collection of printed Danish material. Since 1781, the law has been used as a tool for collecting printed cultural heritage. And it's a number of different materials. We do also have not just printed material, but also unpublished material collected from authors, composers, photographers. So there are many different collections. We have, of course, stable, but also very unstable materials. And like any other library and archive, the major challenge is that's acidic paper, to some extent already brittle. It's the deteriorated leather bindings. It's the large collections of photographic materials, negatives on the base of either acetate or cellulose nitrate. And we have the manuscripts with iron galling corrosion or copper corrosion. I looked into the tradition of, I think, every European institution, either archive or library, we have more or less the same story. In Copenhagen, we had the first bookbinders hired from Paris in 1664. But if we go to the recent times in the 20th century, in 1966, the bookbindery changed their workshop address. And it became clear that the new workshop also should take up conservation workshop equipment. And this development was suddenly speeded up by the Florence flood, also in 1966. And the amount of damaged cultural heritage and the massive challenges in treating objects became a driving force for developing our profession. So conservators from the whole world, especially Scandinavia, initiated a relief response. And conservators also from Royal Library were stationed in Florence for a number of years to work there. And this international collaboration inspired Scandinavia to establish a school of conservation. It was set up in 1973, also with the help of the large national heritage institutions here in Denmark. So of course, this development of the profession affected all institutions, not exactly the same year, but over the years to come. So academic conservators became part of staff in the library, And the organizational changes led to a change from a binding conservation section to a department, which meant that there was a direct reference to the deputy director. That came in 1998. There was a major focus on preservation from our library director, he was caring about the acidic bomb, the brittle paper bomb, as it was called. And there was a national hearing on preservation for all national institutions. There was a national commission, and their report came up with recommendations, and it even led to national grants out of this commission. So do you see I changed slides? Okay. A survey was conducted in all collections with national significance, and a plan for preservation was developed during the years 1998 to 2001. Before that, objects for conservation were more or less randomly chosen by the collection staff for treatment. Also, the library only sent small applications for extra funding to the Ministry of Culture, and that was without a general strategy for preserving the collections for future generations. And the conclusions from this survey gave a direction for preserving collections, and it was supported by a large grant so that we could increase the number of conservators in 2004. Also, the library had grants for a new storage building, actually twice in 2004 and also in 2013. But the survey itself led to a strategy for the practical work, which were not only conservation and boxing of sensitive objects, but also copying of the very heavily degraded negatives. It also gave more focus on preventive measures, such as climate conditions with a better storage, light policy, cleaning, pest management, disaster management, good handling. We also, based on the Commission's suggestions, set up a national project to investigate the master certification and its relevance for the library and the archival sector. And to answer the Ministry of Culture's question about the necessity of master certification, we made a survey of the collections to quantify the amount of acidic paper and to estimate the state of degradation of our collection. And out of our whole collection in the library, 70% came from the critical period from 1800 to 1985. So that was 47 running shelf kilometers. So it's certainly not a negligible problem if we cannot preserve the material from this period. In all these, in the survey and the calculations, we had like two options. Either we go for master certification, or we go for a colder storage. So we calculated that we could actually decrease the temperature to 10 degrees for 190 years for the same price as master certification. We also worked with extrapolation to see how big a share of the objects would exceed their useful lifetime, depending on which strategy we followed, lowering temperature or using mass deacidification. So at the very start of the curve, we have 7% of the collections being brittle, the red line, the lilac line, and do nothing, keeping the stacks as they are. We will end up a few hundred years later with 80% being brittle. If we lower the temperature, deterioration will go a lot slower. And the very lower line, if we stay at 5 degrees, we still would have less than 20% of the collection being brittle in 2200. And mass deacidification, we calculated, would end up giving 40% of the collection being brittle. So from our cost estimations, it was clear that cold storage was far the most cost-effective means to prolong the lifetime of our collections. And at this time in 2006, we were actually making a project on a new storage facility. Already at that time, an identified disadvantage is the required consumption of extra energy, leading to a higher annual maintenance cost and also emission of CO2, which we were, as conservators, discussing at that time. So that means that future management might decide to raise the temperature to lower the costs, and thereby reducing or eliminate the intended benefit. That was the words we wrote in 2006. But nevertheless, we worked on new stacks, and the strategy for appropriate storage facility was to place every material into a climate zone which slowed down deterioration, also of the very unstable materials. So we address this by making a table with warm, cool, cold, and frost climate zones, and then adding each library material into a zone, whether it was okay, good, or no-go, or it could even be optimum. So this shows just a part of a huge Excel sheet with all our collections, with name, amount of running shelf meters, and size of objects. Because moving into new storage should be effective in the way we should spend as little running shelf meters on as most books. And our materials are not all sorted in standard sizes. So some collections have very small books mixed with larger sizes, and that gives quite a lot of waste of space. So we have addressed that, and we have also addressed how to work with a storage plan. So the Excel sheets are now ready for being imported in a development of the Revit software. It's a software which is used for building information modeling. So you will see buildings in 3D. So today we work with importing Excel sheets and the collections into a 3D model. And then we can try out placement of different collections in order to see how it fits in the new shelving system. We have had some new stacks. In 2008, we opened the new nitrate storage, and it's you see the fields and the flowers. So it's an under a bunker, which is built into a nitrate archive. So we have 2 rooms, and the film archive, they keep their films down there, and it's all kept at -5 degrees. Same year, 2008, we added to stacks built in the 19s, we added more stacks. So it was a book storage, and we also had 2 rooms for photographic material. So the photographic material, there was acceptance that it should be stored cold, so it's around 3 degrees. And the book storage has a climate change with change of set points. So it follows outside seasonal changes, but it's still made by technical equipment. So in wintertime, it's 8 degrees, and it increases slowly up to 16 degrees during summer. In that way, we could give a better lifetime, but also save some energy compared to a fixed set point of, for example, 12 degrees. Already in 2004, it was very well known in Denmark by the museum storages that you could go for passive climatization. And it means that the coldness comes from the floor, which is not insulated. And in that way, the climate will follow the outdoor climate. But this principle was not possible here on this plot because the plot was simply too small. So we couldn't go for that. But the next development in building storage facilities, it followed right after opening the book storage in 2008. And what you see here, that's imitation from the suggested project. And the storage, it's a joint storage facility with the National Museum and the library. And it has been a very long wait to make this building project come true. And it was like, first you had to find a suitable plot. You have several tendering processes, and we could start building in 2020. And we will have space for collections, even space for collections to come. So we are able to move all the collections out of the old central building. More than 10 years of internal project development has taken place, and the building project program was written in cooperation with the National Museum. From the very beginning, the ambition was to build a storage with a very low CO2 emission, but also sections with conventional mechanical air conditioning had to be built in for cold storage for our most sensitive collections. But the National Museum, they have passive climatization for the full storage area. It will not be a zero emission building, but we have gone as far as possible for the time being with geothermal heating and heat pumps. But still we have the cold storage for acidic paper, acetate negatives, and iron gall ink manuscripts. So it will take electricity, and that comes from the grid. And in Denmark, we are having more and more wind power. We have electricity from Norway. It's based on water, so that's also clean technology. But still, we also take electricity from coal. So it's not yet a zero emission building. The building project has come forward, and in February 2022, in 4 months, we will have the keys, and we plan to start moving in collections from midsummer and until 2024. Storage is not everything, but exhibition is also a very important part of the library's contact with the public. And presenting sensitive objects in the open library space initiated a project in our department to handle high light levels and protect objects from fading. And with this challenge, we started measuring the lux levels in the library in the open areas to give ourselves a map of light levels. And the final light map, it's showing 3 times, giving 3 sensitivity categories of objects. It works together with a light table. And in that way, it gives an easy to use tool for making valid decisions on the light sensitivity on each object to be exposed. A new treasure exhibition was a driving force in taking microfading measurements into our daily work. It gives us the possibility of foreseeing the fading of each color for every object and to document and store results in our database for conservation. Preservation is not only a task of looking for the correct environment in storage or in exhibition rooms. It's also caring for every other aspect which might become a threat for our collection. So that's like handling transport by keeping clean environment, taking care of pest management, which becomes more difficult with a changing climate. It's disaster management. It's sorting materials from given to the library into climate zones. It's boxing, working with standards. So there are quite a lot of other things than storage. And basic for being able to make preservation in a large institution is that you know the significance of the collection, understand the materials and their deterioration, and how environment impact on materials, and also knowing the theory behind. But it's also to understand how a library or an archive is like it's like an organism. You need to understand how materials are processed through the organization. You must understand how some other departments might be 100% into a certain strategy. You might also keep an ongoing dialogue with other staff groups. And very important, also back up your arguments with a number and analysis. And least not last, understanding the cost of what you are suggesting to do. In the library, we still do conservation on individual objects, but for the time being, it has been minimized. We do it for exhibitions, for supporting the reading room and supporting digitizations. But for the next few years, we will work a lot with the collections, which moves into the new storage facility. They need boxing and barcoding. So it's a major task. In total, we will move 90 running shelf kilometers. While we are working with the collections, the climate change is here. And in 2020, the library made a vision of a climate strategy. And the vision is that the library's operations are climate neutral in 2050. And it's in line with Denmark's overall goal of climate neutrality. So we have 4 key points working with lowering CO2. So in 2006, we rejected mass tier certification, but we knew at that time that cold storage would emit more CO2 than stacks run at higher temperature. But the library has focused continuously securing energy savings in building and warehouse operation. Many obvious energy saving initiatives have been implemented. Solar cells and heat pumps have been set up so that we, to a greater extent, can contribute our own energy production to the operation of our building. What you see here is a storage for newspapers, which is the roof is covered with solar panels. But we have to strengthen this work, and therefore we must also look into the set points for climate zones for the collections and look if our lifetime expectations is still valid, or we need to decrease them in order to save CO2. So that came quicker as expected in 2006. And so I've come to an end. I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I would also like to acknowledge all staff of my department and our collaborative partners in the building service of the library. Thank you for your attention.